Alright, you bastards, this is Some-Belgian-prepper, and today we're going to talk about some thought experiments about what kind of disasters have you personally gone through during your life, and you will see that big disasters, or even smaller ones, are not that uncommon. So, for example, I will list off all the, not achievements, but the list of all the disasters that I've been gone through in what you would consider a relative peaceful and good period in if you look it from history. But before we do that, if you're interested in detective stories, there will be a link to my first book called Bloody Crosses. It's in Dutch. If you're interested, take a look, I would say. All right. So, recently I saw a picture of a prepper who had like a patch, and there was always a new patch on his shoulder for each disaster that he went through. And it made me think about what disasters have I been through my life, and I've been personally afflicted by it. So that's the reason why I made this video, a list of things that I've been gone through, and I want you to make a list as well, to think about what were the things that you've been gone through, and so you can realize by all the people who say, "Oh, this will never happen and this will never happen," but disasters are not always big, but they are there if you really think about it. So, if I going off the list, the first disaster I had gone through as a baby, a child actually, was I've gone deaf. So yeah, I think I was perhaps two. I was born in 1992. I was perhaps 2 or 3 years old, and there was a problem with my ears. Uh, I was becoming deaf, with all problems behind after it. But excuse me. Uh, all right, where was I? Oh yeah. The thing is, if you really think about it, through all of human history, if I was born in another period, they have I would not have gone through an operation to make my hearing better, and I would have grown up as a deaf person. So if I think it in from a purpose perspective, if there was no professional medical science available, I would have grown up deaf and perhaps been eaten by mountain lions or something. Even though Belgium does not have any mountains, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that was a first disaster that could have happened. 1999 was the dioxin crisis in Belgium, which was a period where some sort of oils were mixed with the feeding for livestock, and that's got into the food chain in Belgium and led to they guess around 10,000, the rise of 10,000 people who got cancer because of that food scandal. And yeah, I remember it when I was in the lower school. We got this kind of there was this kind of kids magazine, and even in those they were warned we were warned about don't eat this, don't eat this. There is a big problem with this dioxin crisis that we have to watch out for. So if it was even in kids magazines for small children like me back then, yeah, it was a really big deal. So yeah, that's something that happened. It was a very big food scandal. Even two ministers were fired because of it. Next thing I would say is 2000s, and yeah, it really did not affect me, but it affected a lot of people in the world back then, here, or also here in Belgium. The Millennium Bug. There was a fear that if you gone from 1999 to 2000, that all the all the programming in the computers would not get aligned because of some reason that they did not programmed for, and yeah, all the computers would go haywire, and with all the chaos that would ensue. So yeah, nothing really big happened because except for some computers did not have the right date or had some glitches or some software problems, but it was nothing big. But there was it was solved because of some preventable measurements that they took, and also just some warnings, this and that. and it was not that big of a problem. But for the same thing, it could have been a really huge problem if, but the early 2000s were not that. How do you say this? It was coming up for technology, but quite computers wise, yeah, it was like in the middle, so it was not that big of a problem. If it would happen, something like that would happen now without the preventive measurements, perhaps that would have been worse. But it was something that people always feared. It was like many people were like a doomsday clock that went off, like watch out for 2000. If we reach that, there will be chaos, planes come from the sky, computers will crash, communications will dissolve, yeah, that kind of stuff. But because a disaster didn't happen or was less likely to happen, doesn't mean that there was not the fear of it, and the fear of it could have influenced a lot of people in a negative way. Excuse me. Yeah, I've just ate, so don't worry about that. Uh, all right. 2002, we had the SARS scare. The SARS is a virus. SARS stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome. Yeah, and that was like a disease that came from Asia, and it was a real scare that it could have gone much bigger like COVID, but yeah, it didn't went that big. There was a lot of fear, and yet again, a lot of preventive measurements prevented it to spread, and a lot of people afterwards went like, it was no big deal, there was no problem. What was all the fuss? But because there was the fear, people took preventive measurements, and yeah, that's why it didn't happen. So you got to think about the people that say something like that would never happen. Some people say it will happen, and yeah, the people between are looking for active and preventive measurements. Uh, 2014 we had the MERS virus that was really that many people were scared of. I remember MERS was a Middle East Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome yet again, and yeah, it was yet again a scare that it would spread. A lot of people were scared, and there were small effects. People took measurements, preventive measurements, avoided for a certain period, were very cautious about people who were sick or had a higher temperature, that kind of stuff. So yeah, those things were also in my influence as a child. Next thing I would say is, and this happened when I was in high school, I had a scooter accident. I There was sort of a confusion where some guy at a crossroad wanted to turn in the street that I was going, but uh, the car behind it, already went around it. I did not see. I thought there was no car behind it, but it was already on the other side of the car. I got over the crossroad with my scooter, got hit with the car, flew 6 meters away. Luckily, I had one of those scooters where you had the feet in front of you and not on the side. Otherwise, my leg would have been crushed. And luckily, I had nothing severe from it. But yeah, it could have gone much worse if I did not have my helmet on. I felt in the right way. My leg wasn't crushed because, like I said, my legs were in the middle. This kind of scooter. So yeah, that was a small disaster that directly influenced me. Next thing I would say is this was also in high school. The Kim de Gelder attacks. The Kim de Gelder was a person who had a psychotic breakdown or something. He went into a few daycares, one or two daycares, I think, and he attacked babies with a knife. He killed a few babies, and this was a guy who also wore a bulletproof vest, went around dressed weirdly, and yeah, I remember it well, and it influenced me because at the moment I was in high school, and I remember that suddenly all the gates were locked, all the teachers were nervous because all the police services around called every school that there is a maniac with a knife around that attacks young people or children, and that's the reason why we weren't allowed to leave the school before this was solved, because he was still on large at the moment. And I remember seeing the closing of the gates and the nervousness of the teachers in their face. I remember that very well. Yeah, that was a really bad moment. I would for the victims, I would say it was not a it was one of the most horrible incidents at the time. Some crazy guy who went to a daycare and just slit open on a rampage some babies in a daycare. So it was, yeah, it was horrible. Uh, Next thing I would say, we're going now to 2016. In 2016, there was the terrorist attacks of Zaventem. So there were and Brussels. So there were terrorist attacks in the airport that explosions went off, and there were explosions in the metro of Brussels. Yeah, there were what was it? 35 deaths and 340 wounded, I think. Yeah, it was a big attack, and I remember because the next year, even years, we were on a sort of terrorist alert level. So that means that the army went in big cities on patrol at big public centers like uh, malls, public buildings, and cinemas. So also there were soldiers, and there was a heightened security everywhere. So I remember it well because everybody was in fear. Some schools closed, some buildings closed. There was always a scare, be prevent, watch out, this and that. And I remember I went to the cinema with some friends, and because I had a long coat, uh, the soldiers demanded that I would open my coat to show that I did not have any explosive or firearms. So that was yet scary yet funny in a way. So yeah, it opens your mind to a reality that these things happen in a place where it never happened before. Duh. Excuse me. But in some places in the world, this is every day that they have this gun sort of fear. Uh, Next thing I would say is, oh yeah, I forgot one. 2011, there was also a big scare because there was a mass shooter in Liège, and yeah, there was some crazy guy that on a sort of marketplace where there were a lot of people at bus stations, and these guys just threw grenades and started firing at people with a full rifle, and there were 6 dead and 123 wounded from it. So yeah, that was also one of those in the days and the weeks behind after a lot of people who were scared and watch out, there might be a following attack, this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's also something. Next thing I would say is 2019. We all remember what happened then, COVID. And yeah, I don't have to tell you much about that, how that period sucked, that nobody could go anywhere. You had to be vaccinated, showed it to you. You cannot, you have to take all these measurements in work, in the everyday life. You have to stay home, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to go deep into that because we all know how that sucked. Next one I would say is 2000, 2021. Yeah, yeah, 21 or 22. I think. I was hiking in the Ardennes, and it was the one of the worst rains that fell in Belgium, and the city Liège was underwater because of it, because it was in a sort of valley kind of. The villages were in a sort of valley, in a valley, and there was so much rain in such a short period that it was unbelievable. I remember it as yeah, I remember it vividly. I was with friends hiking, and we set up a tent at a certain hill, and suddenly there was so much rain that my tent was just flooded away. And yeah, that night, luckily we were on a little bit of a hill, not in the valley itself, and luckily still there was so much rain that my tent just got flooded away, and I had to sleep that night in a sleeping tent, in a, how do you call it, a sort of hammock, but I was freezing, and if I did not had my woolen blankets, I would have frozen to death. Or yeah, that's a little bit dramatic, but I almost had hypothermia if it wasn't for the woolen blankets because I was fully soaked. All my gear was soaked. If I would have had gear that was just, how do you say this? Yeah, one of those thermal things, I would have got hypothermia because wool dries and keeps you warm even if it's soaked. It's keep retaining 80% of its isolation value. That way, I kept warm that moment. So, yeah, that was a real test that moment. But when we got back from the hiking and we got back in the more of the village and the cities, it was carnage. Uh, it's unbelievable. The fronts of many buildings were just by the power of the flood was just taken away. Cars were all piled up because they were taken by the flood. Pieces of street, whole streets perhaps at certain places, and big pieces of concrete or rock were all just flooded and stripped away, and all flooded in the same place. It was a quite carnage, I can tell you. And the last disaster I would say that I gotten is the pulling of three of my wisdom teeth. It's not perhaps not a big disaster, but like I said with in the beginning of my when I was deaf, if there was no opportunity for such operations and medical professional help, yeah, that could have gone much worse. So I'm glad that I could have got this removed, and that's a tip I give you. If you got some operations to your teeth, do them now, not later. Uh, if a disaster happens, you don't want to get to sit with ache to your teeth, or if they have to be extracted. So yeah, these were all the disasters that I would put on my patch. It doesn't seem as much, but if you look at it, these are all personal disasters mixed with bigger disasters that are out of your control. And I think we all went through such disasters wherever you live in the world, at what place, at what time. There will always be disasters, whether they are personal, nationwide, or localized disasters, whether it's from nature, caused by people, doesn't matter. Always be prepared for disasters in what form, type, or scale they are. So yeah, I hope this video made you reflect upon yourself, to look how you always need to be prepared, and not always for such big things like a nuclear war or global warming, because disasters can strike anywhere, anytime, wherever you are, whether they are big, small, doesn't matter. Always be prepared to help yourself and be able to help others. So yeah, uh, I think I'm ready now. So like, subscribe, all the good stuff, and see you in the next video. Cheers.